62. That's how many jaguars were killed in the American Southwest since 1900. Government records, official kills, and for decades, that number was treated as a closed chapter. The jaguar was gone. But a trail camera in southern Arizona caught something that didn't get the memo. Southern Arizona, a mountain range near the border, camera strapped to a tree trunk, motion sensor set to catch anything that moves after dark. The air's gone cold with the sun down, the kind of desert cold that drops fast once the rock stops holding heat. Somewhere off in the dark, a canyon wren calls once and goes quiet. The timestamp reads 2:47 a.m., and something walks through the frame. Heavy shoulders first, then a body low and thick with muscle, moving the way a big cat moves when it's not in a hurry. The coat catches just enough light to show the pattern. Rosettes. Dark rings with a spot in the center, not the solid tawny coat of a mountain lion. And the tail. Too long, too heavy at the base for anything native biologists expected to still be walking this ridge. Jaguar, a species the record says has no business being north of that border, not passing through, not this far into Arizona. And yet, here he is, on camera, in the dark, doing it anyway. So the question isn't whether jaguars are crossing. They are. The question is, how? The route this cat is using shouldn't exist anymore. Something's keeping it open. Start with the accepted history, because it's not up for debate. Jaguars ranged across Arizona, New Mexico, deep into Texas. Government predator control records from the early 1900s confirm it. Agents tracking, trapping, and killing jaguars as part of organized livestock protection work. This wasn't a rumor passed down through old ranch stories. It's documented, paper trail and all. Then the killing did what it was designed to do. Bounty programs paid out for dead jaguars the same way they paid out for wolves and grizzlies. Livestock protection turned into a systematic campaign. And by the mid-1900s, breeding jaguars were gone from the US. Not reduced. Gone. The last confirmed breeding female north of the border was killed decades ago. And after that, every agency treated the US jaguar population as functionally finished. Not endangered. Extinct as a breeding presence. That was the official record for a long stretch of the 20th century, and nobody in a position of authority argued with it. Now add the infrastructure. Through the late 1900s and into the 2000s, border wall construction and highway expansion cut through the same corridors jaguars would have used to move between Mexico and the US. Some of that construction was about immigration, but the effect on wildlife corridors was the same regardless of intent. Cut the land, and the animal's route gets cut with it. That's what happened, and for a while, it looked like the corridor was sealed for good. The wall segments that went up through the 1990s and 2000s cut directly across the same canyon bottoms and wash drainages a jaguar would use to move north. A single male photographed in the Dos Cabezas Mountains, 1996. Another in the Pelonchillos, 2006. The cameras were catching cats where the map said they shouldn't be, years before the agencies started paying attention. Here's the assumption biologists worked under for years. No breeding population left in the US. A corridor that's been fragmented by wall and road. Put those two together, and the sightings should have dried up. A jaguar without a reason to cross, and without an easy way across, should show up less and less. Then, not at all. That's not what the trail cameras show. Sightings didn't stop. They kept showing up, decade after decade, one male at a time, scattered across different mountain ranges in the borderlands. Not constant, not predictable, but not zero either, and zero is what the record said to expect. Every one of these cats is coming from somewhere south of that line. And the accepted map, the one with the wall drawn across it and the corridor marked closed, says that somewhere shouldn't be reachable anymore. Confirmed, jaguars are still crossing. Not confirmed, whether any of them are staying long enough to change what jaguar range actually means. Look at the pattern in these sightings close enough, and something jumps out fast. Nearly every documented jaguar in the US since that breeding population disappeared is a young male, still figuring out where it belongs. That's not random. That's dispersal. And here's what that word actually means. A young male jaguar gets pushed out of the range where he was born, usually by older, bigger males who already hold the good territory and don't plan on sharing it. So the young male leaves. Not by choice exactly. More like he doesn't have an option. And once he's out, he walks, sometimes for miles, sometimes for months, until he finds ground nobody else is holding down. So where's he walking from? Confirmed breeding jaguars still live in Sonora, Mexico, in mountain habitat that connects north toward the Arizona border. Not through one continuous forest. Through a chain of what biologists call sky islands, mountain ranges that rise straight up out of flat desert, cool and forested at the peaks, baking hot and empty in the valleys between them. Picture a string of green rooftops, poking up out of a tan ocean. Each one's its own little world. The temperature difference between the peak and the valley floor can run 20 to 30 degrees on the same afternoon. Pine and oak up top, cactus and creosote down below. A jaguar moving between them isn't just crossing distance. He's crossing whole climate zones, sometimes in a single night. And the only way to get from one to the next is to cross the desert floor connecting them. Thin corridors of similar terrain, wash bottoms, canyon country, the kind of ground a big cat can move through without walking into a highway or a housing development. A disperser doesn't need unbroken forest the whole way. He needs a chain of stepping stones, one canyon to the next ridge. That's the whole requirement. Start with a drainage line in the Patagonias, a culvert that wasn't built for wildlife, and a jaguar that didn't care. But there's a complication. 100 years ago, that stepping stone chain ran clean, ridge to ridge, canyon to canyon, all the way up into Arizona. Now, a lot of that same ground runs straight into border wall segments, into 4-lane highways, into subdivisions, and irrigated farmland that didn't exist when the last breeding female was alive. The historic path isn't gone entirely, but it's not what it used to be either. And here's where it gets specific. Trail cameras have caught cats still finding a way through. Not through the wall itself, through the gaps. Culverts built for flood runoff. Wash bottoms that dip low enough to slip beneath a barrier. Stretches of rugged, vertical terrain where construction crews never bothered running a wall line because the ground itself was already close to impossible to cross. That's exactly the kind of ground a Jaguar's built for. Steep, broken, useless to a truck. Ideal for a cat. Some of these cameras have caught the same general pattern more than once. A cat moving through in the coolest hours before dawn, using the exact same drainage line a different cat used years earlier. That's not coincidence. That's the ground itself doing the work, funneling anything moving on 4 legs through the one gap that's still open. Which raises a harder question than the one you started with. If some parts of the old route are still passable, which parts exactly? How much of that historic chain is actually left standing? Nobody's got a complete answer. What they've got is a string of confirmed crossings, and a growing suspicion that the map everybody's been working off of is out of date at the edges. Sit with what that actually means, because it's easy to overreact to it. This isn't a hidden population of jaguars quietly breeding somewhere in the Arizona desert, waiting to be discovered. It's stranger, and honestly simpler, than that. It's the same mechanism that's always driven jaguar range. Dispersal, one young male at a time, walking north because the ground behind him is already claimed. He's not colonizing anything. He's testing an old edge, the same edge his species tested for thousands of years before anybody built a wall across it. So here's the open question, driving the whole case. Why now? After the breeding population collapsed, sightings dropped so low that agencies treated the species as functionally gone from the US. Then the cameras started catching them again. One male in the 1990s, another in the 2000s, another this decade. Not a flood of crossings, but a steady, repeated presence where there should have been none. That gap needs an explanation, and right now, all anybody has is theory. Take El Jefe, the most documented of these border-crossing males. First caught on camera in the Whetstone Mountains in 2011 by a hunter and his young daughter. Tracked across multiple ranges for years. Then he vanished back into Sonora, photographed there in 2021, still alone. The pattern holds. Theory 1. Climate pressure and habitat shifts in Mexico may be pushing more young males to disperse farther, and to disperse more often. Less stable ground, less food security in a home range, and a young male's got even less reason to stick around fighting for scraps. Deer and javelina, the two prey species a jaguar leans on hardest in that region. Both take a hit when drought years stack up back to back. Less water on the ground means less green growth, which means fewer deer, which means less to eat. A young male, already low on the pecking order, feels that shortage first, because the established males eat first and defend the best ground. He walks instead. That's plausible. It's also not proven. Nobody's tracked a direct line from a specific drought or a specific habitat loss to a specific cat showing up on an Arizona camera. It's a pattern that fits, not a mechanism anybody's confirmed. Theory 2 follows directly from that. Basic math. More young males, more competition, more of them looking north. Here's the piece that's actually confirmed. The Northern Jaguar Reserve grew from 10,000 acres to over 60,000 in the last decade. That's documented. That's a win. More secure ground means more cubs reaching that dispersal age. Now here's what actually separates fact from guesswork in this case. Confirmed. Males have crossed repeatedly, over decades, verified by camera and by track. Not confirmed. Whether a female has made that same crossing anytime recent. And that detail matters more than it sounds like it should. Right now, the record doesn't have that female. What it has is a string of solitary males, each one testing the same door, none of them able to open what's on the other side alone. And the door itself isn't static. Newer border wall segments, 15 feet of steel bollard driven into the same wash bottom a cat crossed in 2012, now sit directly on top of some of the last open stepping stones in that old Sky Island chain. Each one of those green rooftops a little harder to reach than it was 10 years ago. Ground that cameras caught cats crossing 10, 15 years ago. Biologists don't know yet how much of that corridor just got sealed for good, because a wall built last year hasn't had time to show its full effect on an animal that might only attempt that crossing once every few years. So the case stays open. Nobody, not the agencies tracking these cameras, not the biologists mapping the Sky Islands, can say right now whether this is a species testing the edge of ground it'll eventually reclaim, or a species watching its last door swing shut, one wall segment at a time. Same ridge, same gap in the fence line, same lens pointed at it. The sensor's still hot, the same way it was that night at 2:47 a.m. when the first cat walked through. One fact stays confirmed. The path still holds. One question stays open. Whether it holds long enough to ever become more than one cat at a time. 62 kills documented. And now a camera catch. The record was written by 1 century. The question is, who writes the next page? Drop your state if you know a stretch of ground that still feels wild enough for a big cat to move through. Subscribe for the next case file.